So we so we are now beginning to merge the health issues with the overall risk reduction of climate change itself, because they are very closely related to each other. So this is a calculation of climate risk index for 1998 to 2017, and you can see that the countries most affected by extreme weather events during 1998 to 2017 are ranked here, from Puerto Rico, Honduras down to Dominica and so on. So they are spread basically in the global south, either in the western hemisphere or in the eastern hemisphere. And you can see that a country like India, for example, has a fairly high risk and climate risk, and it is surrounded by countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Burma, and so on that are even higher in their risk index. Okay, so this is obviously not a good thing in terms of geopolitics and in terms of perceived national security issues and so on. So, as we have briefly mentioned before, climate risk is high in the global south, and they are more vulnerable to climate hazards, natural and amplified by anthropogenic, like Philippines got hammered by a couple of typhoons in 2020. That's not good, and it's clear that the strength of these typhoons are being amplified by global warming, which mostly comes from the rich world, the industrialized world. So there are these sorts of inequities which go into the climate gap. But nonetheless, given these climate risks, there are global efforts like the Sustainable Development Goals under the UN. They were called Millennium Goals before, and I think in 2015 they got named as Sustainable Development Goals, which include education, poverty reduction, access to clean water, access to healthcare, and so on. So there is a 2030 agenda for that, and there is climate change adaptation under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. IPCC works with that entity. There is a disaster risk reduction that came out of the Sendai framework just a couple of years ago. All of them together want to have an intersection where they want to reduce vulnerability and enhance resilience. Okay? Obviously, you have to think immediately that what does this even mean? So you need metrics for vulnerability, and we saw one example from India from the work of Vittal, Karmakar, and Ghosh, which showed the socioeconomic vulnerability to hydroclimatic hazards in India, which has multiple parameters that go into it. So resilience also has to be defined so that you know the investments you are making, the policy framework you are creating, and the adaptation mitigation actions you are taking are actually showing up in the metrics for reducing vulnerability and enhancing resilience. This is a key ingredient for these things. There are more list of items for approaches to reducing greenhouse gases while adapting to a changing climate and protecting public health. This I copied straight from the book chapter. A lot of the material I've been borrowing here and there just to expand the scope of the book. So to run through them, promoting alternative modes of transit, including walking, biking. So these obviously reduce GHGs, and by reducing motor vehicle pollution and increasing physical activity. So there is a co-benefit associated with that. Make communities greener by planting trees and developing green, cool roof projects, parks, buffer zones in flood-prone areas. Strategies to reduce air pollution and noise, directly improving mental health, physical health, and reducing the urban heat island effect. When you urbanize, you lose the moisture, you create surfaces which are absorbing the solar radiation, they reduce reflectivity or albedo, so they get hotter, and urban centers can be detectably warmer by several degrees compared to the vegetated rural regions. That's the urban heat island effect. Can have serious impacts on health and energy consumption, hence on pollution. Construct green, efficient buildings that reduce GHGs while also improving indoor air quality, thereby directly benefiting the health of the occupants. So green buildings are now certified, so there is reduction in use of water and energy, and they increase light inside, they improve indoor air quality, and so on. And many buildings, like the Empire State Building in New York, have chosen to retrofit the old buildings with windows and energy systems and so on. And you can see that with calculation, the investment in the retrofitting is paid off in terms of reduced energy costs and so on, and the external costs of improved working quality and so on and so forth. Okay? Reducing fossil fuel use and gain a series of direct benefits to public health in communities affected by air pollution. Sitting in India, that's a big concern. Right now, Mumbai had become very clean during the COVID lockdown. Now life is back to normal. Pollution is back to normal. So pollution shouldn't become part of a normal life, right? Reduced fossil fuel combustion will reduce toxic chemical emissions, particulate matter pollution. It will also reduce the emissions of ozone precursor chemicals and thus reduce smog despite a warming climate. So CO2 increase may warm the climate, but some pollution, ozone precursors, make smog much worse, create serious breathing problems. Okay? Reduce consumption of meat and high-fat dairy products to substantially reduce emission of methane, which is sometimes referred to as a super pollutant because of its potency as a greenhouse gas. In the first chapter, we looked at some super pollutants which have much higher greenhouse warming potential than CO2. Okay? As I said before, consuming meat and fish comes with improved standards of living. When people get richer, they want to consume more meat and fish. Of course, there is also indication that the wastage of food also increases. But they not only increase methane production, but they also are related to cardiovascular diseases and cancer. So there are co-benefits of reducing meat consumption. Not only does the environment benefit, but you yourself will benefit, especially in this context of health. Okay? So it's not always easy to convince people to give up cultural practices that have been around for millennia, for many generations. So there are alternatives being produced like veggie burgers, artificial meat, and so on. Maybe in a decade or two things will be very different. Maybe people will be very comfortable eating veggie burgers and artificial meat and so on. But one has to be sure that they don't in fact harm the health. They don't have side effects, chemicals in them that actually are worse than the meat in the first place. Okay, so there is always that care needed to make sure that we are in fact improving our health and reducing our footprint on the environment.